One of the biggest and most anticipated chess events of 2025, FIDE World Cup, kicks off today in Goa, India, the cradle of chess itself. And welcome back to my channel. I'm International Master Zura Jawahadze, and over the next 2 weeks, we are going to witness 206 world's elite best chess players battle it out in knockout matches where a single mistake can end the tournament. Their tournament. The format is brutal, 2 classical games per round, and if you are tied, it goes into rapid and blitz tiebreaks. 3 candidate spots for the grabs, and the champion walks away with $120,000 out of $2 million total prize fund. Let's break down some of the highlights of the first round. I have my favorites, friends, and colleagues participating into the tournament. And first, let's see who are the players. You can see some of the world's elite at the moment: Gukesh, Arjun, Prag, Anish, Wesley, Vincent Keimer, Wei-In, Nodirbek, Abdusatoro, among many other players. Former winner of the tournament, Magnus Carlsen, is not playing. I think he recently had a baby, so he's on his father duties. And this is the prize distribution. Okay, even if you get eliminated in the first round, you still get paid $3,500. That is one of the reasons why this tournament is very popular among the professional chess players. Getting in the tournament already is difficult itself. That is the location and some previous winners, as we can see. But without further ado, let's get into the games. My first favorite, Andy Woodward, who recently crossed 2600, and I have had pleasure of working with at a young age. He is faced against Himal Gusain, a local player rated at International Master 2476, and it indeed was a fun first match. Let's see. Andy starts the game with pawn to d4. Himal responds with the balanced pawn to d5, c4, and immediate capture. We have Queen's Gambit accepted. And he goes for e4, probably the most aggressive approach. Pawn to e5, knight goes to f3 to defend the pawn in the center. Bishop b4 check, knight c3. This is all theory. Black takes on d4, knight takes d4. Black, white temporarily sacrifices pawn, but will get the c4 pawn back. Knight goes to d7. We are going to take now the pawn on c4. Knight goes to f6. As you can see, both players are so far comfortable. And this is where first, I don't know if this was unexpected for black or what, but bishop takes f7. Temporary bishop sacrifice, and after king f7, queen b3 check. When king goes back to e8, black actually does not lose the piece back here, okay? If queen takes b4, there's going to be c5, okay? And apparently this can be played still. After that, c takes d4, and white sacrifices a piece, but king is going to be stuck in the center. Okay, so after knight d4, short castle, apparently computers suggest white still has huge initiative here, so position is somewhat unclear, but the same is true for the castle. So Andy sacrifices a piece very early on here. Okay, short castle. Now, what does black play? Black moves the bishop back to d6, which, as you can see, is a slight inaccuracy. Capturing here on c3 would make more sense. And after bc, for example, knight b5, knight c5, queen b5 check, probably knight f to d7. Those were the only moves. And you can tell this is a very complex theory. Or not even theory, I would say that they are probably already out of theory, but very complicated position. And practically, I salute Andy's choice. I think it's very hard to play precisely here unless you know exactly what computer is recommending. Okay, so bishop d6 was played in the game after some 24 minutes of thinking, which apparently is an inaccuracy. The correct move against this was simply bishop to g5, or playing rook e1 with the idea of then opening up the e file. But Andy plays knight to e6. Now, why is this inaccuracy? Let's see. Queen goes to e7. The first side looks very natural, right? To go knight e6 here. Knight goes to d5. Then knight takes d5. E takes d5. Apparently, computer says that white does not have enough compensation here if black plays king to f7 and that tries to run the king away to g8. Now, if the rook e8 is allowed, obviously, it would then make it easy for black to go there. Now, queen f3 check, I believe, is going to be blocked with queen f6. But knight g5 check, also king is going to be able to run away to g8. So I'm not sure if white has quite enough compensation here. Computer is going desperate here. Bishop f4, you can't take because of the d6 check. But something like queen f6 here, or queen f8, or apparently knight c5. What if we go rook e1? Oh, the queen is hanging. So after knight c5, this queen has to move away somewhere. Most likely maybe like takes here, cd, and wow, like queen g3. Black is very close to bringing this rook in the game, after which they will end up a piece. So after e takes d5, knight c5, which computer marks as another inaccuracy. Knight takes c5, bishop takes c5, and bishop to f4. Now it gets very difficult for black here to handle these threats over the e file. King d8 would be possible, but apparently then rook e1, something like queen f6, maybe queen g3 here, but then there's bishop d6 or bishop e5. So very much understandable why here black would be worried about this, but apparently bishop d6 now hits the h2 pawn here. So rook f8 was played in the game. Rook a to e1, rook f4, rook takes e7, bishop takes e7. So naturally black wanted to simplify things here. Rook and two minor pieces are supposed to be better than the queen, but black is going to need to bring the a8 rook in the game. That is very often the thing with the material imbalance. The difficult thing for the side who has a lot of pieces, like rook and multiple pieces for the queen, or three minor pieces for the queen, or there can be different kind of imbalanced queen versus rook, minor piece and few pawns, for example. A big thing is about whether those pieces can coordinate or not. And in this case, it's going to be hard. All right, so rook goes to e1, rook to f7, and queen to c2, hitting bunch of pawns here at the moment. And the next move is going to be the critical mistake for black. Okay, the move was g6. The better move was apparently bishop to f5, giving up the c7 pawn, then sliding the king because there was a d6 threat, and then giving up another pawn, bringing the rook to c8, giving up even other pawn. But okay, right now that cannot be captured because of bishop b4, discovered attack, and we're going to lose the rook. So black is safe here, hides the king, and ends up in a position with rook and two minor pieces for three queen and three pawns, which supposedly is balanced, but computer gives this an advantage for black since it's going to be easier to play for black. Okay, just to illustrate how powerful rook and two bishops can be, even against the queen. So g6 was played in the game. Now queen takes c7, and after this, apparently white's initiative is too much to handle here. King g7, d6, and this pawn is gonna be pushed forward all the way. Right now d7, obviously rook is controlling it, but rook e7 is the first brilliancy in the game, forcing bishop takes e7, d takes e7. Now the exchange was sacrificed, but on the next one white will simply slide away the queen, and after bishop b7, that is no different here. If you capture the queen, another queen is going to promote while capturing the opponent's rook. So white is going to win some material here. h3 to give a loft. There is no rush to promote. And the next rook, queen takes a8 or e8 immediately will be the case. Rook d8 happened apparently after ed, bishop d7, g4, h6, here queen b8. Now white is chasing on the black pawns here, and eventually ends up with the two connected passers which are going to decide the game. So black resigned. Good start for Andy, and I hope he can bring this match home without too many difficulties tomorrow. And in the next matchup, I think he is going to be paired against Kirill Aleksenko, a very formidable opponent who formerly actually qualified for the candidates tournament, and he's been 2700 before. Okay, so that should be a fun matchup for Andy. Next matchup I want to show you was played by one of my favorite players and a dear friend, Aleksandar Indjic, or Ninja, as we called him at the start of our college. We were roommates, actually. We started University of Texas at Dallas together. Okay, years ago. It's crazy to think that was actually 10 years ago. Anyways, let's get into it. He is paired against Ilan Schnaider, the prodigy from Argentina. I think he is only 14 years old. You probably have heard of Faustino Oro and the Messi of chess from Argentina, but Ilan is also forced to be reckoned with, and I'm sure he is headed towards the Grandmaster title very soon. On online streets, he is about 3,000 mark in both blitz and bullet time controls, so he is no novel to playing against strong players and world's best players. Okay, so the game starts as English what is this, the symmetrical system. Knight f3, knight c6, knight goes to c3, knight to f6, pawn to d4, cd, knight d4, e6, and now we transposed into the Sicilian defense of the kind of like Marozzi bind, but Taimanov / Sicilian Khan transpositions with pawn to e6, which usually leads to a lot of sharp battles here. Knight c6, b takes c6, bishop d3. Now white wants to play e5, so black plays e5, short castle, pawn goes to h3, h6, and f for h6 was to stop white from going bishop g5, I believe. Pawn to f4. Now white wants to open up the f file here. Bishop c5 check, king slides on in the corner here, d6, queen goes to f3, building up the pressure on f file here. Potentially rook goes to b8, rook b1. If we want to move the bishop out, we want our b pawn secured here. a5, pawn to b3, and black decides to capture on f4. Bishop takes f4, bishop goes to d4, attacking the knight here and bringing the bishop on this diagonal, in general the long diagonal where it's going to be guarding this knight on f6. Bishop retreats back to c2, queen to e7, now preparing for bishop e5, which is what happens next, and rook f2. White starts to build even more pressure on the f file or the d file. So it is a flexible move in that regard here. Next move, depending on what black is going to do, white's gonna bring rook or double up rooks on one of these files, okay, f or d files. So after rook e8, India decides rooks are better located on the d file. So rook d2, knight h5, bishop takes e5, queen takes e5, and now black has some threats of his own, so white brings the knight back to e2. Pawn goes to d5. Now the point is, if c takes d5, I guess c takes d5 and then queen d5 was possible. I was wondering if there were some queen e2 tricks, but I don't think black has enough here. So Alex decides to take on d5 with the c pawn, which apparent computer says why not just take with this pawn. I'm assuming maybe queen d5, what, queen takes d5, e takes d5 here. Oh, there is rook e2, so there's no c takes d5 because there will be rook e2 and the fork. So on d5, white has to take back with the rook. because there is no rook takes e2. Apparently there is a checkmate, the back rank checkmate. H7 square is covered with the queen. So bishop b7. Oh wow, so this is the move that players were calculating probably, because now if you take there rook e2 and suddenly you're double attacked, the bishop and the deadly, this g2 pawn is gonna go down, or one of them rather. So that is actually winning for black. Again, never too late to blunder. So takes this, queen takes d5. Apparently queen takes d5, rook takes d5, bishop b7. The right move is rook to b5. And now if you take on e2, then rook takes b7, eliminating the bishop. You can't take because of the back rank checkmate. And white now regains the upper hand here. On rook b5, could you play bishop takes g2? Apparently you could. King takes g2, rook e2, king g1. The only move you can take here because of the checkmate again. Rook b2 e8, and now bishop d3, attacking rook and the knight. You have to go back to e5 and bishop f1. Once the rook's going to be traded, and two connected passers on the queen side paired up with the bishop is going to be more powerful than knight and two connected pass pawns apparently. So white has a big advantage here. That would have been a fun line, but Alex decides to keep it simple here, take with the c pawn. Now bishop goes to a6, basically wants to take on e2 and get this knight g3 funky business going, but nope, none of that is happening here. Bishop to d3, apparently taking on d3 would have been the best choice here. And point is that after takes on e4 here, d takes c6 is happening, and you do not have time to take the knight because now the c pawn is gonna decide the game. So after rook d3, apparently the precise move was taking on d5. Now you can't take with the pawn because of d3. Rook takes queen e4, rook e4. I'm assuming like knight c3 probably, rook e3, takes on h5, takes on a5. And this would not be a very easy position to evaluate. Apparently, if there were no kingside pawn weaknesses here, if white manages to play rook d2, one more move, this would be completely winning for white. But since black is the one first to reach the second rank, now pushing the pawns are going to be not so easy, because once you start pushing the pawn, rook is going to go behind, and then the other rook is going to come to c2, the second rank. So one rook constantly has to stick with this g pawn to defend, whether that's from the bottom, like rook here, or from like the top, right? Rook going to above the pawns. So computer says that this is not going to be an easy win, but Ilan, having left only 2 minutes on the clock, actually fast player, good blitz players tend to get into time troubles. I would like to think one myself to belong into that category, by the way. So now pawn to d6. The point is you cannot take because the knight is hanging. Rook goes to d8, bishop to c4. Now the pawn on f7 is under attack, rook d7. Now let's trade off queens, shall we? That is not the best move. Apparently applying more pressure on this f pawn would be better than bringing the knight to well, what's the point here actually? If you what does white want here? Queen g5. White wants to go what, like rook e2 and then push the pawn. So not easy to deal with. So queen c3 was played, I guess, to neutralize the counterplay here, and the big factor is that black has seconds left on the clock, so they are playing on increment. Each player gets 30-second added on their time after each move. So queen f3, queen e5, and then rook f1, knight g3 is played in the game. Again here queen f4 to eliminate the danger basically from the board. And the next move is rook takes f6. Indjic sacrifices a rook here, well, an exchange to ruin black's pawn structure which according to the computer was absolutely unnecessary. Simple king h2 to defend this knight would be enough. But well, Alex is known for his creativity, so he chooses this particular line here to sacrifice. King f8 apparently would have been the best move, but Ilan goes wrong with the c5 here, which kind of makes sense to include this bishop in the game. But now h4, and this rook is in trouble. It can go to g4 because of knight h6, rook h5. It's stuck there. Rook g6, there will be knight e7 check. So that was the reason why black would be better off moving the king away. So now if h4, this rook can come to g4. Okay, so that doesn't happen. c5, and after h4, this rook is going to be in trouble. Once the rook is lost, white regains that sacrificed exchange back. Now ends up already a pawn up, and there will be few more going down. The a4, rook a4, obviously a5, excuse me, should be winning too. But if the pawn endgame is winning, that is the simplest way to converting your positional or material advantage, and that's the case here. Black simply has too many weaknesses here on the king side, and white king is going to be able to take these pawns one by one, and meanwhile black has to worry about the queen side pawns here. If king goes to c3, simply pawn to b4, white is gonna give up the pawn there, and then win all these pawns, after which the kingside pawns going to decide the game. Good start for Alex, and again, I hope he brings the match home. And who is he facing? Actually, we are going to see that here in a minute. All right, another Dallas player, Jeffrey Xiong, is also playing in this tournament. Jeffrey has not played high-level tournaments, I would say, for some time, so I am very happy to see him doing what he does best. So e4, he starts the game with the king's pawn. We have the Sicilian position on the board. His opponent here is Li Yiheng. I hope I do not mispronounce it, from Hong Kong. I wonder how this player qualified for this tournament, but remember, each federation gets the one spot. Okay, so knight to c3, pawn goes to a6, h3. We have the Najdorf system, and h3 I think is called the Adams attack. Knight returns back to e2 here, and h5, which is the modern approach here. In general, the idea of h3 is white wants to play g4 and expand on the king side that way. Bishop g2, then f4, short castle, bishop e3, and enjoy this king side space. But black does not allow that with pawn to h5, stopping this g4. So now this bishop is going to come out from g3. Okay, pawn to b5, knight to d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5, hitting this rook. Rook a7, bishop to e3. I swear I saw this position very recently somewhere else in one of my games, actually, that I reviewed also, but I cannot recall now which game was it exactly. So bishop to e3, we have the Adams attack of the Najdorf defense. Rook apparently goes to b7. Not sure why it wouldn't go to d7 here, but rook on b7 is apparently better. Here queen returns back to d2, knight d7, and pawn to b3. I'm assuming that aims to stop this knight c4 ideas. Okay, I goes to f6 and a long castle. I think a lot of us were expecting white to go short castle here. That's probably what I would have done myself, but Jeffrey seems to be familiar with the theory here because starting the game with 1 hour 30 minutes, he has more time after 15 moves. So that is a safe assumption. Okay, he is still in his prep here. Short castle g4, opening up the king side. Black does not want to do that. White, I believe, is going to insist on opening up the king side here. Ef knight takes f4, rook d7, king slides on b1. Very standard move to avoid counterplay from the opponent here, if there are going to be any. Maybe he wants to play knight d5 and wants to avoid bishop g5 also. Rook f1, rook a, queen goes to f2, and as of move 22 we have an unclear position on the board. So props to the black player here, rated under 2000, for keeping up with theory among the world's very best. So very impressive play, I would say. But here is where it gets somewhat critical. Okay, now black has spent a lot of time here. He has 11 minutes left on the clock, while Jeffrey has almost 50 minutes. Okay, that's a substantial advantage on the clock here. Now queens are going to get traded, and even though this bishop is not that great of a piece, pawn to e5 is the key move. Okay, if black had time to play f6 here and stop white from opening up this diagonal, it would probably be a different story. But after e5 here, this bishop is gonna become very strong, targeting this black's queenside pawns. So knight to c7. Apparently this was the mistake. Taking on e5 was a better move order here. The reason for it, I'm assuming, is trading rooks is going to be in white's favor, single rook. The rook pair are going to set up better defenses. Now after trading single rook here, white king is going to be able to get into the game, and that is going to be the decisive factor, as we will see, because black king is going to have a difficult time doing the same thing itself. So rook f2 here, I'm assuming rook f2 to stop black from invading, and white king now marches towards those weak pawns, and bishop f1 to keep h3 secured. Now b4, then goes a4, c4, and already this is very unpleasant for black. As you can see, white wants to push c5, win the a6 pawn, and then these two pawns are going to be unstoppable. f5 apparently is a little inaccuracy here, point being that I'm not sure actually what the point being on that. I'm assuming he's trying to create some counterplay of his own, but Jeffrey very skillfully defends the h3 pawn, stops a3, and then simply takes the a6 pawn, and now these two passers are going to decide the game. If you take their knight b6, rook f7 check, he's gonna lose the knight. King d6 was played in the game, but pawns are going to get pushed and promote. So black resigned here. All right, the next one, my another favorite in this tournament, Titas Stremavicius. Okay, from Lithuania, another teammate of mine. We have spent 4 or 5 years of college time together, and many tournaments also played together. So I hope Titas is having a good tournament. Now let's see what happened in the first game, where he faced against Sebastian Bogner from Switzerland. I believe Sebastian, originally from Germany, has switched federations to Switzerland. So Titas is playing with black, pawn to d4, d5, c4, e6, solid as ever. Queen's gambit declined. Knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, pawn to c5. We have semi-Tarrasch defense on the board. C takes d5, c takes d4, queen takes d4, e takes d5. Here looks like Titas' approach is hold with black, strike with white. I support that decision, my man. Let's go for it. Now bishop to g5, bishop e7, pawn goes to e3, short castle. This is probably one of the most solid continuations with black against the queen's gambit declined. Or queen's gambit in general. So bishop e to h6, bishop retreats back, bishop e6. Now black accepts the isolated pawn, but that is going to be the only weakness into the black's position. The trade-off is that all the pieces are going to have good squares. Okay, bishop is going to come to e6. This now 3 minor pieces have already been brought out. Knight c6 is also gonna come with the tempo. So all black pieces are located nicely. And looks like Titas here knew farther theory. So after queen d3, queen goes to b6, forcing some simplifications. After trades bishop f6, bishop knight d5, bishop d5, queen takes b2, bishop c4, and we have a simplified position with opposite colored bishops on the board, which a lot of times hint towards the equality, okay, especially if both bishops are useful, and that's the case right now. A little bit of a scare probably around the king here, but g6 keeps it all together, because after bishop takes g6 here, rook to d8, queen is not going to be able to stay on this diagonal, so it has to move away. It goes to f5. Now black accepts the piece sacrifice, brings the bishop back, and white is going to have nothing better but to repeat the moves here. So game ended in a draw. Okay, both players kind of look like took it easy. So we'll see now what happens tomorrow in round 2, where Mamen is going to have white colors. Now the point is, if you go king h8, there's going to be knight h4, bring the knight to g6, and let's say if you go there, check. If you now try to go king g8, knight e7, and it's still a draw, but why risk it, right? Why risk it? At the moment, even in the best case scenario there, I think it's going to be unclear. So solid draw for both sides, I would say. Now, there were a few more interesting games, but I think we should keep it at those. How many games was that? I think that was only 4 games. All right, let me show you one more, okay, which I think deserved our attention here. It was Ilan Cheparinov versus Angel Gabriel Cordoba Rua from Colombia. I thought this was actually a very fun game. I'm gonna go quickly over it because the finish was a beautiful one, I believe. So it was the Spanish opening Archangelsk variation, the standard Spanish. White probably got a little bit of an advantage in the opening here, but then gave it up somewhere around here. However, Ilan Cheparinov, former 2700 player and a very strong player, he has an advantage on the clock, and that advantage showed. Black blundered rook e8, knight takes h6 here, a pretty straightforward blunder. I think then queen g6 and takes on f6 with checks, and takes everything with checks, and the rook trampoline. King goes to f8, queen goes to g6 here, threatening the checkmate. Rook e7, now knight takes e5, the rook is hanging. So if you take pro on c8, there's going to be actually the same checkmate as on the previous one. Rook takes c1, and can you see it? That is right. Queen f7. Rook takes f7, knight goes to g6 is actually a mate. And knight takes e5, rook c to e8. If you want to test yourself, pause the video and see if you can find white's next brilliancy here, which leads to a checkmate. It is right. Queen to f7. Rook takes f7, knight g6, check and mate. Two knights trap the king in the corner. If you take rook to c1, it is actually the same thing. Still, queen f7, knight g6 is a checkmate. A very nice game. You always feel good about winning a game like this, and I think it can serve as a motivation for the following rounds. Games like this can change the trajectory of your tournament literally 360 degrees, or should I say 180 degrees. Anyways, we are in for a treat. Knockout matchups always make up for fun tournament, in my opinion. Since childhood, this has been one of my favorite formats to spectate, especially, and one day hopefully participate. That's the goal. Let me know who are some of your favorites, who you are cheering for, which games you like, which games did I miss, and hope to see you in the next rounds. Make sure you subscribe, turn on that bell button, and hit the thumbs up so next rounds get shown to you. Cheers. Happy Halloween.